Nice to meet you.
Will not be attending today, he's out of town, and,
You're meeting at 11 to 12.
Yeah.
As I do at the beginning of all these meetings, just to lay the ground rules, everybody knows, but I'll say it for YouTube as well. This is a public meeting, minutes are being taken, being recorded on YouTube and live streamed and Zoom and everything else you can think of. If anybody does have questions, please direct them to me and I'll try to keep things moving in an orderly fashion. We have a pretty light agenda today, which is nice, so I'm hoping that we can dispense with it relatively quickly. We'll keep everybody on the morning. Steve Pixley will be joining us, texted me a little bit late. So we do have Sandy Welty on Zoom, it looks like. Anybody else?
These videos, no.
Okay. Anybody else on Zoom? Just
No.
all right, so we might bump around the agenda a little bit, so that we don't do things that Steve needs to be here for. Public input on any non-agenda items. I have one, but I'll Steve's here. I'll ask him during his harbor report. I was about the Proc,
Yeah,
Proc, but really Proc. You said, it's okay, it's huge.
really?
Oh, I saw that the other day.
I don't know, it's very nice, but curious. Okay, seeing no public input on any non-agenda items, we'll move to the meeting minutes. I know Mark had a few comments, he checked with me or emailed me about that one. Did anybody else get a chance to read the June 13th? Reflecting, I will say, our somewhat new or return to the old schedule of second Tuesday of every month. Morning, Richard. Good morning.
Morning, Richard.
Any thoughts on the meeting minutes?
I think Mark has a lot of points for reading.
Yeah.
We'll start with the-
Well, it was raining.
Yeah, what else?
All right.
The last one.
Get the chairs. What do you got?
So my points were, on the review and transfer of day sale license.
Yep.
The way the minutes read is we approved the sale with the Lazy Jack. We didn't do that. We approved the transfer of the license, which in turn facilitates the sale of the Lazy Jack.
But my understanding is that we don't really approve nothing, we recommend.
We recommend.
Exactly, yeah, that, exactly.
Okay.
Recommend select board approval.
We recommend the select board approves the transfer of the license to facilitate the sale of the Lazy Jack. And we did, by the way, so.
And the other one was, in the harbor master's report, Steve made it clear that he feels the, touch tank takes up 3 parking spaces.
Yeah,
Seems to be a lot of question about that. You know, most
Yeah.
people think it's 5 spaces, and if it's supposed to be 3 and it's been mismarked, then we need to regain 2 parking spaces there.
And I'll be honest,
I don't know how we can do that, actually. Have you gone and seen it?
well, from the, just for the minutes, just because this reflects the last meeting, and then we can sort of open it up a little bit. Bruce, you had in the original one that it was 3.
Yes,
wasn't it?
and that's what Steve
And
said.
my note was different on that, so that was like, but still, if we have 2 people saying it was 3. But still, we'll change the meetings to say, the harbor master gets in his report, 3 parking spaces. 3 parking spaces to the right of the harbor master's office will be used for a touch tank, aquarium. Or in that, so I guess we need a motion to accept. Anybody have any other changes to the minutes? We have. a
Everybody else
motion.
breathe?
Uh,
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as changed, as amended.
Any second on that? Bob, thank you. Discussion. And my discussion on that would be, that I think that the minutes do reflect the, discussion on June 13th. But that I agree with Mark that there is some debate about how many spaces actually are taken up by that structure, facility, whatever you want to call that. I went down last night.
In the town of Camden, doesn't removing a parking place require an act of Congress?
Ordinance change.
Well, it's temporary, it's not a permanent installation. And the
Yeah.
select,
Uh-huh.
no, we didn't approve it as a permanent installation.
Okay.
The select board voted on it, so.
Well, was it,
What's
was
the
it
season
3 or
of
5?
the tank? When is it there?
So I'll go back to the minutes and give you an answer on that.
Don't worry about it.
No, I do worry about it,
But
so
it's not a touch tank, it's picnic tables.
Well, there is a touch tank.
there's a touch.
I know,
tank.
but, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's,
It's a little more than a touch tank.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a little picnic area or something.
Is it a touch tank?
What's that?
It's actually
Just
not a
viewing.
touch tank, yeah, just a tank.
Oh,
Can't
that
touch it.
tank, yeah.
Okay.
So it's an aquarium,
Aquarium, there we go.
yeah.
It doesn't say no touch.
Well, you can try to touch it, Bob, and then
But
we'll see what happens.
This is getting way deep. We can really waste a lot of time as to what an actual touch tank is.
Yeah.
No, but it's not, it is not a touch tank.
But I'm asking, what is an actual touch tank?
Well, they're shallow,
Oh, yeah, you
you can usually reach in and either
You can reach in and.
Okay.
You can pet the lobster.
cut the lobster, the stingray. The lobster can catch your finger.
Electric eel.
He didn't have.
Okay, any
But I'll
further?
get back to you on that.
That'd be great. Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor? Approving the minutes as amended, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're gonna jump around a little bit, so Steve not being here right now. And we're gonna go to the status of the peer moratorium. And thank you, Stephanie and Sophie for coming. So that you tell me if I screwed this up. The select board and planning board had a workshop on the 28th of June, it was, and Bruce and I both attended that one. It was a two-part, one about short-term rentals, but then also about the peer moratorium. And no actions can be taken, obviously, at workshops, but it was a lively discussion, of both topics. But I think the gist of it is that, I'll be honest, it's a little confusing. The planning board approved of our recommendations and voted to put them back to the select board, which they did back in, I don't know when that was, June or something. May. But then they added this sort of statement that, but we also think that there should be a discussion at least of banning all piers in the harbor, all new residential piers in the harbor. But it's always they did it in this workshop as well as in their public hearing. It was sort of an add-on, and I was like, well, what are you doing? I know, so that's why I'm a little bit confused, I'll be honest.
So basically, they made a statement without really wanting to make a statement.
I guess, well, they wanted to go beyond, but that sort of does.
Yeah.
Kind of fly in the face a little bit of what, we put forward in our recommendations. But I will say in the meeting, which was a good meeting, there was a question about, did this committee, ever consider, good morning, did it ever consider, banning piers? Okay, and I told them, I said, we went into the review of the peers discussion and the moratorium with no preconceived notions. Everything was on the table, and we used data and research to kind of guide us in coming up with our recommendation. So we did consider banning piers, and that was an option, and we decided it's not necessary. There's an existing, and Bruce pointed out, the existing language in the ordinances we determined to be sufficient with a few recommended changes.
Gosh, that's not really my memory, frankly.
Okay.
I think that we had this sort of, now it's a year ago or whatever, we had sort of the menu of what the select board had put out as the reasons and the concerns, and we were asked our opinion on that. And I remember specifically saying that that's what we're looking at. We never said, well, guys, what did we think about, just getting rid of them? So I don't feel like we discussed that, or that our recommendation was sort of an implied opinion that a ban would be inappropriate.
Okay.
Andy Welty here, if I could. There was a number of years ago a vote, and the committee recommended to the board that the moratorium be put in place. Just historically speaking, the board obviously didn't follow our recommendation.
We did, we referenced that at the beginning of our review, Sandy. We did talk about that previous, I think it was 2015 or so. But that was, we did talk about that and said that was a different harbor committee and a different select board at the time. So we wanted to kind of go into it with open eyes, I guess I would say. And you're exactly right, Bob. We broke down the moratorium. We looked at the elements of the moratorium and said, what was the, what are the elements that the voters approved? And sort of went element by element and how we addressed all of those. So
Wasn't the pier moratorium, wasn't that the whole point of it was, should we ban the piers? Is that the,
it was to,
any new piers? I mean, not gonna take out those.
Honestly, I think that there's a lot of opinions out there.
Yeah.
And I think just like with the planning board, there's clearly people who think that we should just plain ban piers. But we've been pretty rigorous about, we get assignment. I think this group has been pretty rigorous. We get assignments from the select board about what they want our opinions on. And that we took the moratorium list of concerns as our agenda. And it didn't say on there that we want a moratorium because we think we shouldn't have any more piers. So that was not a specific point of conversation. And at some point, I could be wrong, and I'm not gonna go look at the tapes. Mark probably will. But I think I spent 15 seconds saying that that's not in our conversation.
See, it's my recollection that, I mean, this all started around sea level rise. And that the moratorium was to look into sea level rise and have a discussion on how piers should be constructed or not constructed based on that, which then morphed into elimination of all piers. New piers.
well, I think sea level rise was one of the elements in the moratorium, but it was not the only one. There was, I don't have it in front of me.
Public access.
It talks about concern about
Environmental impact.
and about any new doors, proliferation, whatever.
Right.
Density, and that's how we kind of came up with those 4 categories that we ended up sort of doing a deep dive into. But sea level rise was certainly one of them,
The impetus was sea level rise, because. No,
I don't want it was a select board
Yeah.
initiated moratorium. I don't say what the impetus was. It was sort of, it just came to us, so.
Well, they claimed that there was an emergency,
Right.
right? So we addressed the emergency. And the reality is that there really isn't an emergency. There's a concern and it's pressing. But there are also regulatory parameters that are set by the state on when you can create a moratorium. There has to be this, and this. I mean, I don't know exactly what they are, but there are boundaries. And there has to be significant progress in order for that moratorium to stay in effect.
Right.
Well, we did our job. We sent the recommendation back. Whether or not there actually has been sufficient progress, that would justify the moratorium continuing to be in place is certainly debatable.
I think that the, discussion with the planning board the other day, it took a little longer to get going, but
Yes.
welcome to.
I mean, the conservation,
Camden.
the conservation commission also gave us recommendation. The planning board did their
Mhm.
job. I think they're between the harbor committee, the conservation committee. And the planning board, there has been progress and it's sufficient, right?
Yeah,
We can
but
have
for
very
how
long
long?
conversation
I
about
mean,
that.
this could go on ad
Yeah.
infinitum. At some point,
I think the idea is to put something in front of the voters sooner rather than later.
Right.
So, yeah, so
Yeah.
going back to.
the moratorium wasn't designed to say, do we want piers or not want piers?
Yeah,
That was not,
That was never
there
there.
is nothing in that moratorium that brings anyone to that conclusion.
No,
See, I think the issue here is that one real telling fact is we want a moratorium, but nobody can really pinpoint exactly why we want the moratorium.
no, I think if we go back, I mean, it's been a long while, but I think if we go back to the select board, the select board discussion on having a moratorium, it was mainly about sea level rise and making sure that if we were continuing to building piers, that they would be built high, sufficiently high, so that they would withstand, those high tides and flood tides we have and things like that. So I think that was the first concern. Then it morphed into maybe a larger discussion. But I think originally for me, my recollection at least is it was because of sea level rise and making sure that the infrastructure we have in the harbor can withstand, those damages, because we keep seeing them more and more.
Right.
So I think that was the primary concern. But I'm happy to, I'll go back and look, but.
I do now recall conversation more that we went through things like where these piers significantly interfering with navigation and stuff like that. And I do remember saying, we can say they don't do this, they don't do that, they don't do the next thing, but there's still a question we weren't asked, which is, what do we want the harbor to look like?
Right.
Is there a reason aside from the sort of micromanaging of design plans to say we just don't want a lot of piers, whether they're 25 feet apart or 300 feet apart or whatever.
And I do remember that conversation, exactly. And you're quite right that when that came up, we said, you're right, we are being asked to look at this moratorium.
Right.
And the elements of this moratorium, and that did not include sort of our view of what the harbor, should look like. We were asked to sort of look at it on the element. But anyway, just to kind of tie this one up, my understanding is the select board is going to take set tonight. But only to
Extension.
set a public hearing for a possible extension.
Yeah.
Yep. And that would
Because that's what we are required to do.
right. And then that would be, I think it was the end of July, like 25th, or the very beginning of August, something like that. It was in the end, but.
Yeah, it's in the agenda.
So anyway, just to keep everybody kind of in the loop on that, that's the next step is the select board will have a public hearing on the moratorium and potentially extending the moratorium, and then they would vote on whether or not to do that. And that
The issue we have to be transparent is that we need to extend the moratorium, even if we put it on the ballot in November. Because there would be a lag of 2 months or something like that. So, I mean, I'm hoping we can put something in front of the voters sooner rather than later, because we've been working on this for a year and a half. The reason why we need to extend it is to have enough time to.
But what is it we're doing? Are we rewriting the ordinance? Are we eliminating piers, or what direction?
So this would be, two things. They would extend the moratorium.
Yeah.
And allow development office and all of them to implement the changes of our, recommended in our report.
That's my question. What are the changes?
Oh, it's what we all outlined in our report. Raise
Oh,
the
that's-
piers
Raise the piers.
from 6 to 8 feet.
Yeah.
Make them adaptable to sea level rise.
Detachable.
And
include
require
floats.
permits
Yeah.
for, basically all structures,
mhm.
including land attached floats. Those are the three biggies that we recommended.
I only had two, raised,
Raise the, maximum height from 6 feet to 8
Oh, that's
feet
right.
above,
Yeah.
mean high water. Make them, any new structures need to be, able to be modified in order to accommodate.
Yeah, okay.
potential future, and then, require a permit for all structures, including land attached floats. So that's, kind of where that's at. I think it is coming through to, finally a head, which is great.
Mr. Chairperson, can I say something about on this subject? May I borrow your microphone? So just a quick recap. I must have been 10 years ago when Richard was chairperson. He spun off Ben and Sandy because those are the two gentlemen that really brought this to the attention of that board. They came back about 2 months later with an overview showing the current restrictions, I think I want to call them, for where you could build a pier in Camden Harbor in conjunction to if there was one already existing, how many feet you need to have, 500, I believe, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, here, with the existing conditions, here's how many more piers could actually be here. And they looked at the picture overview and they're like, we don't want the harbor to look like that. Now, we discussed, and you can look at the minutes, that when they did, create these, they figured, well, this would be enough. And also there's economic impacts. People that have houses really can't afford to build a pier. They're very expensive. But then we came to realize that the people having a little bit more income, and so they can actually put this many in. So I don't know if that's part of this moratorium or not. Is it just sea level rise, or is there an actual still a feeling that as a community, do we want our harbor to look this congested? And do we have the ability to say, okay, this is enough? Is that going to be a talk? And if it isn't, I think it should be.
Yes, so I think, do you wanna?
Sure.
So I think after the planning, the joint workshop between the planning board and the select board, where the planning board recommended that we would ban building new piers. I think that's starting to reshift the conversation into that direction. So I think it's a two-pronged conversation. Yeah, so the first part of the conversation is making sure that the existing piers are adapted to sea level rise, so that we're raising them up, etc. But not allowing any more construction of piers, either in the coastal harbor or in the inner harbor. So, outer harbor, sorry. So two different things to be debated. And that requires a town vote, I think, because it's really how do we want the town to look at? But the work that the harbor committee has done in terms of looking at the conditions that would need to be met to build more piers is super valuable, regardless of the outcome, I think.
Yeah, so it's sort of the way I see it is,
I don't agree.
we have two pieces. We have, what we have recommended for, any new piers.
Yeah.
Any new piers would be built this, take all these factors into consideration. So that's the path that we were on. That's what it directly addresses the moratorium. We then have a second conversation that sort of has come up, as a result really of the planning board and conservation commission. Sort of saying, well, we actually don't want to have, we think we should not have any piers. That is the second conversation, and I think if that goes forward, that would be subsequent to the report.
And that's probably what, I mean, I cannot speak for the whole select board, but it's probably something we might want voters to weigh on, whether we want more piers or not.
How do you mean that procedurally?
Well,
Because usually the voters are the last stop, not the, do we want to have a conversation?
so, I mean, the conversation is happening, I think, already, and public hearings, you're right, in terms of procedures. What I'm saying is that the select board is not going to decide whether we ban piers or not. I think
Right.
that's a question that should be put to the voters.
Right.
Is that like,
Yeah.
by my point, yeah.
Yeah, so you You lay it all out, you set the table, you
Yeah.
do the discussion,
Yeah.
and then at some point, the voters have read all about it and whatever, and then they say thumbs up, down.
Exactly.
Presumably.
And we put information out there and we do public hearings and they can,
Yeah.
they can,
Presumably we're perfect.
of course, of course.
Yeah, they come to us and ask us.
The harbor committee recommendations, that needs to be put in front of the voters too, because it's an ordinance change.
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
If the vote have to be voted.
That's the most immediate.
that's the
Yeah.
immediate thing.
But
That's the short term.
That's the
Oh,
short term.
okay.
That's going to, the goal is to put that in front of the voters in November. That's why they sort of set these public hearings, on specific days and everything, because they have to get the language done.
Yeah.
So that they can put it, to the printer kind of situation. So.
And the timing of elections is
Yeah.
complicated.
Complicated.
No, it's
So-
short, actually, that should be straight down.
So just hypothetically, all right, we do have a pier that has been approved. All right,
Yeah.
and it followed all the guidelines and
Mhm.
regulations, it's been approved,
Yeah,
all right? So now if we say, no more piers.
Yeah.
Okay, who's gonna cover those legal issues? Will,
That's beyond our scope, but
That's
also,
way beyond us.
if my understanding is.
oh, I know, but it's just the question I'm asking.
My understanding is if these, we have a moratorium, so if the moratorium ends, or at whatever point, whether it's November or September, whatever, at that point, then previously approved things could move forward. Does that make sense? Previously approved peers could then move forward. Right now they can't, because there's a moratorium. So once that ends, totally separate from this potential ban, which is sort of long picture. Anything that is currently approved would be ready to go. That's right. Yeah,
Assuming it meets the,
assuming it's all the new, right, potentially new criteria, if those go forward. So, if
I'm not sure about that.
Mm.
Neither one of us are lawyers, so. who knows?
No, I think
It might come down to that.
I'm happy to ask the question to Bill Kelly and talk to him about this. And look at all the hypotheses, all the different scenarios, if you will, of approved. Well, in case of the pier that has been approved before the moratorium, I think that's the most critical issue. In the eventuality that we ban all piers, is it included in it or not? I think it's a fair question.
I thought so.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So I'll take it to Bill Kelly and I'll get back with scenarios.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Harbor Master, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Would you like to give a report on the harbor?
The boat traffic is definitely down from the last 3 summers.
As is the visitor.
Yeah, that's another, that's one of the reasons it's down. May was the coldest on record. June was the wettest on record, I think, ever. But there's still a lot of foot traffic in town. The new wharf is getting a lot of ovation. It turned out really great. It's proving to be, as strong as we thought. It just looks great.
Yeah.
The new floats, I mean, the new floats, the new day sailor float and the new dinghy turnover floats in front. No one ended up noticing because the wharf looks so big, but those are really old. Those, that day sailor float must have been 35 years old, maybe more. It's probably more. So the letter was sent out to the last 2, there's actually 3 floats that had blue foam, and that was received well. I got a little pushback from one guy. He was gonna try to keep it in, because he was like, I didn't know about it, and can I go to the select board? And Audrey was almost gonna say yes to that, and I said, it was Peter Carter, who's a nice guy, and I said, Pete, you got to pick your fights. I said, the select board does not, they want this stuff out, and so we got that out. So that's the last of that. I just built when Dave St. Laurent and I were doing the whole project, one of the things he said, he goes, you should cover those garbage pails up, because they're kind of unsightly. It's just the north of my office. And so he's like, you put those, and we can talk about maybe putting a shed on there on that. And so we started on that yesterday, actually, and built a nice little sunshade place for the front, and then we bring around the back, so, that's looking really good, people are loving that. Mooring turnover is about normal. You know, we had 5 people that didn't pay, so they forfeited their moorings. A lot of folks do that, I found over the years, they do that actually because they want to give it up. They're just like, don't pay it, that's, said it's not even release form, they just forfeit it. Some people not so, and I get the call when that's the case.
They still sell their gear, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
It's not like they're forfeiting the gear as well.
no, it's their gear.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes they do, I can.
Yeah, so it's odd, it's pretty odd when they, well, I'm taking my gear up and going somewhere else, it's pretty rare. I mean, it does happen.
Yeah.
Someone actually did that this season, they're like, well, we've got a spot in Rockport, and so we're gonna pay Dallas, our inspector, to pick it up and bring it around. But that's pretty rare. Steamboat landing floats, we rebuilt them twice, took winter, that's a rebuild. 2 of them again, because we had that other storm late spring, after we put them in. You know, they're holding up good. I've already I'm putting away, I think, 40,000 a year. For them, because they're, you know, they're 23 years old. And they're great floats, prop build them, but they're showing their age. We rebuilt the inside, there's big bolts and big angle irons, and we put new threaded rod in to, you know, but there's even the 6x6, there's an 8x, they're egged out inside the holes. We're trying to do a new hole, so now we're losing some strength. So I'm probably gonna come to the select board sometime in October and say, instead of waiting another 3 years and then make them all, the 2 front ones closest to the land are the ones that get pounded the most.
Yeah.
So I might say, hey, let's take 80 grand and get 2, or whatever it's gonna cost to build the two new ones, and then slowly every year just replace them as we go.
What about the slabs? I'm sorry, Bob.
Well, there's some slabs, a good question. We're working with Proc and FEMA to 16th, the FEMA's coming up again. Just to back up, I've met 3 times with FEMA, 4 times now, and Valerie is this woman, she's great, and it looks like, knock on wood, we're set up to get, don't quote me on this, but she said 75% of what we paid for that, the whole new wharf. That's with the block, you know, fixing the granite blocks, pinning them, everything. As far as the steamboat landing, that's gonna go 2 ways. Fix it as it was, or fix it so it's stronger. If we fix it as it's stronger, then it's a whole different, it's a different set of cards we gotta go by. That's a mitigation process. They're coming to look at it. I told Proc to, as soon as they can, give us a quote.
Will we get potentially FEMA money for replacing the slabs?
Yes.
As well, okay.
Yes, but again, it's a whole different percentage, like, okay, it's only gonna be 100 grand to put it the way it was, it's gonna be 400 grand to make it so can't get hurt again, or it's much stronger. They want that, but so we gotta figure out what that is, and if I think we do wanna do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched everything today. Yeah, we're pretty strategic with the wheel.
It's a tough one, because what was there has lasted 23 years. With, you know, some people say, oh, it's always bad. We haven't spent that much money on that in 23 years.
And it shows.
Well, you know, yeah,
It shows.
it does.
It shows. I mean, it's still.
So
Take a beating.
yeah, it does. So is it, you know, the devil let you know, or you wanna go with a different process and figure out? Because I talk to people that know, and they're like, I don't know what to do.
That's got a little iffy to back a normal car down there.
Yeah.
You know, a regular pickup truck might be okay, but between the things you can fall in and the bumps that look like they could take your muffler.
Yeah, oh, I've lost a trailer axle on that. Because, yeah, even though we come back, we get another storm and it's,
So it sounds like dealing with the slab, dealing with the floats is obviously very important, but dealing with the slab sounds like it's an even higher priority for you. Is that, am I stating that correctly?
well, I'm hoping that I'm hoping that Procter comes, we can say, let's look at it and say, let's just do the pull trigger, like we did with the wharf. Let's do this, pull trigger, let's do it, and, you know, the same with that, we got a quote from Proc and say, well, let's do this. Here's a company that makes slabs that are 3 times bigger, put them together like this, and we're all good. And then say, okay, how much is that gonna cost? Show the FEMA, and hopefully they're gonna say, yeah, we like that, we're gonna give you 60%, or whatever they say. We're gonna pay for 60% of that. Well, I don't know what that percentage is gonna be, hopefully the higher the better.
And then hopefully, when you're reviewing that, you will review our report that we did, spent, quite a lot of time on as well. So I hope that gets sort of incorporated in with the solution, like, oh, there was.
We were talking about that like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, isn't it this opportunity, Steve, to re-engineer Steamboat Landing? Because it seems to me that we keep putting Band-Aids on this place, and Steamboat Landing, if you come by sea, the first thing you see in Camden. That's not representative of Camden.
Well, actually, the first thing you see is the people.
Yeah.
Actually, it's pretty
Yeah,
common.
but what I mean is that it's the first contact with the town. So, I think there would be value in really having a Steamboat Landing project. I think we've been talking about it for as long as I've been on the select board. So how do we?
Sophie, what's the problem? There's the condition it's in, but what's the problem with the
So the
concept?
dinghy docks also are saturated, and we could have more space. We can, maybe make it better, take more advantage of Steamboat Landing.
So just remember, my first year, and I'm just kind of off the record, like, I think one of the reasons, Jim French was here for 14 years, and I remember I said to him, well, why are you leaving? He goes, well, having that Steamboat Landing there, everyone, when I walked through, the committee was like, you better be on your toes. It was the first year, that's how I know how old the floats are. That was the first year I was harbor master. It's exposed to the southeast, and get ready, and if a storm comes, take them out, and, they were nervous, and if you're right, it's got its cheese out in the wind. I mean, you guys see what it's like on a rough southeaster, so, I think we have to be careful on what we do there. Because I'm not saying we've been lucky, because, we know how to extract them pretty fast, but the more floats you have, the more longer it's gonna take to extract them in case, and all of a sudden you get this, a southeaster rolling along. I mean, it's pretty bad.
I think we have sort of two, issues there. One is what I would classify as an emergency, which is the
Yeah.
state of the ramp, because people have to be
yeah.
able to pull their boats out in the spring and the fall, and they sort of can't. I mean, they can't, but it's a lot of, it's difficult right now. But I agree that then, sort of, we do that, you can call it Band-Aid, or you can call it a sort of dealing with an emergency, and then we have to deal with then we should look at the broader items identified in that report, which was,
Yeah. And the safety issues also.
Yep.
I mean, so I think there's cause to have a project for Steamboat Landing and improve it.
I don't know, I was more responding to it's the first thing people see when they come to Camden Harbor. It's like, yeah, it's pretty unobtrusive.
No, but what I mean is that if you land at Steamboat Landing to come to Camden, it's pretty crappy, and you've never been here, you're like, is this what we want to show people who come to town the
Yes.
first time?
A couple of semi-micromanaging, hopefully today get someone over, because between, I think it's the first and second float where you did the repairs, one of those screws is backed off. It's like sticking up an inch waiting to catch some
Yeah,
kid's
That's
foot.
continually happening. The reason is because there's so much play in those floats that all those big screws we put in have sheared off, they're broken. Because they move
This
so
one
much.
literally looks, it's still got its top on it,
Yeah,
but it's up about an inch.
probably because, it's a slag that's long, and it's broken right here. And so that's working its way up, because because there's still play in that thing, so even but yeah, I gotta figure out what to do even just for the last.
Okay, I just wanted,
No, I appreciate it.
but the second thing is, I guess I'm hoping we can get a sign over there that tells people who have engines on the boats that are tied up there to leave them in the water. Because you see these rubber ones with the engine sticking up, and then they come in sideways and get blocked. And then that engine is going against the side of my hull, and it's like, maybe they think, okay, the engine's out, and now I keep it from getting scummy.
Yeah,
But it's a danger to other boats, because the boats don't lie parallel to each other.
yeah, we get a sign that says no engine go.
We do, or you,
We can, yeah.
it'd be good, because there were at least 3 or 4. There was like 1 or 2 that had the engines down, and 3 or 4 that had them up waiting to attack.
I just had 2 quick ones, Steve. One was the mooring, or it looks like a crock barge, up by Northeast Channel. Is that a temporary thing? What is that?
It's supposed to be.
All I know is it's a big sucker.
I'm guessing I'm guessing because there's another float, rock float in Sherman's Cove. I think they may have left that there, and I'm just assuming, because I don't know why they didn't take it with them, after they dropped it there for the fireworks display. They must have been like, well, let's leave it in case that other one needs a place to kind of storm. Maybe, because it's, I don't even know how long it's there, the other one.
Can you check with them? It just seems like it's a bit of a hazard because it's right in the channel, right, when you come in from northeast.
Yeah, I could call Eric.
Just to ask.
Are there gonna be fireworks for the Camden Cup?
No,
Okay.
no, we're gonna have fireworks for the festival, Winchester Festival,
Okay,
and I'm not getting a prop barge in here, I'm gonna use the Tibbetts. The Tibbetts float,
Okay.
it's much more, it's not as big at all, it's only maybe 70 feet, 60 feet. I'm gonna go, well, we have two spots to put a fireworks display, one is that new place, the other one was between Ocean Point and Curtis Island. The problem with putting it next to Curtis is now we have to, that night we have to have someone on the island, and then the next day we gotta go and check the island, which I can do. It's a much better place as far as viewing.
I like the new location.
Then the
Sure,
location's
it's
good if you have a boat. If you're on land, you can't see.
Yeah.
You can see,
Can't see
yeah,
that.
waste of money.
Well,
Waste
kind
of
of.
money.
And unless you get them, they were gonna try putting bigger, higher shells, and it didn't seem to help. So, for the festival, I'm planning on putting it back and just putting my crew on the next day to look at, just to inspect Curtis Island.
because my boat got completely covered with, one year, the smoke and the greasy smoke,
Yeah,
it drifted in on my boat, and my boat got completely covered with it. If you stepped on it, your foot was black, that was black after that, so.
that was when it was over at.
Curtis Island, yeah. But I guess over in Sherman's Cove, it could affect the boats in Sherman's Cove, so.
Sorry.
The other question, it looks like there's one float that's still not in the harbor. Two little floats.
There's two that are in. Well, because they.
Is it
Well, yes, it was, Zerko, they don't have a float ready yet, but he's trying to build one. He couldn't contract somebody, another guy didn't know. Even though it's a 4-year-old thing, which, whatever, I don't know what's gonna do. They're trying their best, but I said to him as well, you gotta get the old float out, can't have any blue going. And so yeah, but they're in the process of building it, they're getting it done soon. I think the other one's gonna be ready in about 3 days, what the Carter built. He got Toby Winkelhofer to kind of stop everything he was doing and build a boat, right on the front burner for him, so that's good, but yeah.
So we don't have any blue from that. It's all gone?
It's all done. I believe Zerko is literally going out today
Okay.
because he hired Stevie Lee to take it off on a trailer.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's a violation, they work.
They do.
Stephen, moving down the agenda here, at the last meeting, you asked for discussion about a new Inner Harbor field.
Yes.
Can you tell us anything more about what you're like? Any visuals?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an overview and I haven't, but I could just show you guys here, like, so. If you imagine this set of tables as being the footprint that we've allowed we have in our floats. We've got 4 columns of floats. And and my second year here, when we did the federal dredge, I formed a dredge committee, which was basically the harbor committee with their hats turned around. I think we had 2 other people helping us that joined that. Richard, were you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, basically, we wanted to figure out how we could, literally, we've used real math, and it was kind of cool. We should have brought some trigonometry professors from the high school in to figure out the catenary of the chain. So at high tide, it was bone tight, so at low tide, we had minimal movement. Anyway, we got 4 more floats by doing that, actually 5 more floats. But when you're coming in on the east side, the west side, and only one boat comes in on the west side, it's the Angelique, because she's such a deep draft boat, and there's a shallow area on the other side that they'd rather not tangle with. And as it is, you gotta wait for a higher tide to come in. But the last float is a PG Willie float on, let's call it column number 1. I call it 1, 2, 3, 4, going from the west to east. There's 4 rows. Now, there's definitely room, because the day sailor floats here, they have plenty of room. I've got a turning basin here, and then you've got the green boats right here, the shoulders of this gentleman, and then you've got those last 3 floats, you've got the big 3 schooners over here, and you've got another small northern turning basin here, which big boats are good, they can turn, they can come in, they can turn, they can go back into the town back dock, the 100-footers if they want to. The reason we didn't put one in on here is because Mike, who owned the Angelique, was like, well, it's tough, you put another one in there, because we talked about this, but the Grace Bailey's Jaboom came out, and the day sailor float is here, and he's like, you gotta make a hard right, get around if he's got 2 boats stacked up, and then make another left, and then you've got these the last 3 floats right here to get into his berth. And literally, he was like, you guys can come in and have breakfast on my boat, I'll take you out when I go, and you tell me if you think we should put another float there. And no one took him up on that, I don't know if they thought he didn't have a good breakfast, I don't know why they didn't. That discussion stopped.
So where would you put it? I have,
Okay, yeah, so you see this guy?
yeah,
You put it right here.
right here, okay, so you have right here. Behind this guy,
Oh, okay.
and then, sorry, I cannot visualize the harbor, I need a picture.
No, that's,
So,
you're losing it. So now the Grace Bailey has been sold,
yes,
and so now we only have 1 boat there. And now it's, it just doesn't make sense not to fill that hole.
She's in Rockland, right, the Grace Bailey?
Straight goes in Rockland, yeah.
but, so that would be, we're adding another float, another single float, but that would be for
In a harbor float, that would be for the waiting list, people on the waiting
waiting
list.
list, not commercial float, right?
No,
Okay.
What kind of boats would go there?
well,
42,
anything above just to a 42 foot. When we're discussing this, we could make it so the town owns one side. So if it's windy or whatever, and we want to make it so there's no boat on that side, or whatever, you know, we can decide if we want to put something on that on a nightly basis. I think I'd rather just put it on as a same as the other floats.
Yeah.
Just have it so it's both.
So it's in the first row or the second row?
First row.
is right,
Yes.
So it's going right
Here, really, the Peachtree dock is.
right
Right.
here,
right there.
right here.
Oh, that's Peachtree dock. We have one right there.
Yep, gotcha.
You can even put it a little, like, somewhat of an angle, or, and then, you know, this guy's leaving.
I get it.
So
Was there any other schooner that came in replacing the Grace Bailey?
Not current. No, the reason
Thank
is.
you.
But the reason is because remember, they've been there since 1939, and they've always shared that berth, so they're
Right.
tied to each other.
Right.
So because Ray owned both schooners, it was a hassle, but it worked. You had 2 different owners, and they're tying to each other. I don't see that working.
Well, okay, Steve, can I point a couple of things out here?
Sure.
You go back far enough. And the Bowden was the 3rd one out beyond those 2.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Right. And the ordinance declares that there are 3 schooners, windjammer slots at that location.
That's, but I'm not sure. if I agree with that.
It's in the ordinance.
Well, yeah, but the mistress was taking one of those spots, and that's that last 70-footer. I mean.
Mistress
inside that
was
70-footer.
inside.
Yeah, well, that's, it says, the select board can elect to rent to 3 schooners out there. And there were 3 schooners, the mistress, the mercantile, and the Grace Bailey.
Okay.
So it didn't say rafted up on that point. Specifically.
Yes, I think it does.
Well, let's have to get that out. Anyway, yeah, once again, we've taken an idea of, I mean, are you saying that you think the town should do that again?
I don't know,
Yeah.
except that the ordinance allows for it. And
Yeah,
we don't know what's gonna be the state of the windjammer business in 5 years.
well, the only reason I bring this validity to this point is because we could extend that 130 feet out a little further past, and then put another 70-footer past the Grace Bailey. I'm sorry, past the mercantile, and then put another vessel on that. So it has its own, then you have to drive 2 new sets of dolphins to hold that in place, and then you get another windjammer there. If the town and the select board felt that's what you wanted to do, that's feasible.
Yeah, the fact is that, 3 vessels, 3 schooners, I'm gonna call them windjammers because they were all schooners, were there in the 80s.
Yeah,
And I don't know the logistics of how, John Nugent, who was managing Bowden, I'm not even sure who owned Bowden at that point. And Les Beck's dealt with things. I don't know, yeah,
Yeah, but there's only, there's still three schooners that the town elects or elected to stay at the end, or the most, as the ordinance says, the most easterly part of that town
Right.
landing.
Wait,
But it's
there's only
never
two.
had three bullets tied up on the end of that in a long time, and there's no way it would work.
So
I don't know how they did it, but the fact is that if you're talking about boats that are sticking out into the turning basin, which is, I'm not, and you're saying, well, because the Grace Bailey's bowsprit's gone, there's now room for the Angelique to get by, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's great, until something changes in 5 years.
Right, so I think where I am on this is, I think it's a interesting idea to bring in a new float. I think there could be a lot of benefit to it, for the town and for visitors, et cetera. I hear two different, factors that need to be evaluated. One is the ability for the existing vessels to access their slips. And so in this case, it sounds like it's the Angelique, and it sounds like it's a little bit of a two-pronged thing. One, I'm kind of like, why can't they use, like, couldn't this problem be solved if they used the north side, east side, whatever that is, the Lyman Marsh, that side? So why can't they do that? Is that a dredging thing? Is that, what is that? So that's issue number one. But issue number two, which I think is greater, is, I do think that if we were to put in that float, say today, just go out there and do it, we would be potentially in violation of the ordinance, because we would be blocking what is clearly in the ordinance, a third windjammer berth. It does very specifically say that there are 3 windjammer berths at the east end of the public landing. It does not talk about who the owners are and who the boats are, how they're moored. It's very vague, yeah. So I think that's
Flexible.
something, but I also think that it's, although, we're all sad that the Grace Bailey has left the harbor, I would be very concerned with making changes that would preclude another vessel from potentially coming in, another windjammer coming in and using that space. I do recognize that there would be some changes that would need to be made, because I don't really see how you can have, but maybe, to Richard's point, maybe there's a way that everybody can work nicely together, be an unusual situation. But it would work, but also, like you said, maybe the docks can be reconfigured a little bit, maybe there's a way, I would suggest that, number one, we need to talk to the current owner of the Angelique, which sounds like it's the only one that is restricted in its ability to maneuver through that basin. That's the only one that's.
Well, let's remember, Josh, that everybody, when they leave, takes that same path to get out. They take the eastern side to come in.
Yeah.
The Angelique's the only one that leaves on the western side and then comes back on the western side. The other ones still use that, and they've been using that for years.
Right. It doesn't sound like the other ones have any issue. If there was a third windjammer there, they don't have any issue making a turn.
And to be honest, I didn't see an issue even when the Grace Bailey was there. with the Angelique.
But I think we should listen to them and hear, sort of reach out to them. So that would be issue one. I think we should also look at the ability for all of these vessels to use both channels, because it's a little odd if one of them can't use the other channel. But maybe there's a legitimate reason why.
There's a rock on that side.
There's a rock on that side.
There's a big rock, there's a rock, yeah, and the gentleman who owned before Mike McHenry on the Angelique got stuck on it once at a really low tide. So low tide, he doesn't want to use that.
But then I think, the other thing is, I think that we do need, as a panel, to look at that third windjammer berth and say, what do we do? Because it seems like that's a real opportunity. Maybe we can attract them again, or we bring it back to give it, as many traditional vessels as possible. Yes, Bob.
So maybe I don't know enough about what's there, but I'm not sure what. Because I agree with what you're saying, and as Richard was saying, this stuff's in flux, and I think that the windjammer schooner world is a huge part of who we, go back to that question, what do we want the harbor to look like? We want to have it look like big old sailing ships are there, at least on Saturday night. And so to do something because we have an instantaneous space that would block that, I'm not sure what the upside of what we're using this space for. I didn't quite understand. Is this for transient boats come in for the night, or for one individual owner to get to put a pleasure craft on it, or what would be on this new float?
That would be, so, the people that have been waiting for 12 years to get an inner harbor float.
Remove pressure on them.
Basically, a resident or someone pays that wants to have an inner harbor float. There's two more float sides
But those
to have in the
people,
pool.
those people would currently have probably moorings.
They have mooring, yeah.
Outer harbor. So I just feel like, do we really know what's happening over the next couple of years, and should we just slow down?
Yeah, well, I think we also have to listen to the harbor master who's been here for 22 years to say, we can put this float in safely and still have the other schooners. I think, I've been talking about this for 15 years now. I'd like it if you guys can make some time to come out with me and take a look at this, not just in your head think, what? Let's take a look at it. Let's come out, go on the Angelique. I'll talk to Dennis. I'm sure.
So if I hear you, because I'm not doubting anything you say about navigability, but the question is putting in this new float in some way going to restrict getting either a returning vessel or a new vessel to replace the one that left? Or is that, in your opinion, both? That's just not, it's not an either or. You can have both.
I've always felt we can have both. For sure. But it's enough, whenever you have someone kind of questioning you, then you always kind of stop thinking about it and say, it's not worth it.
So I think we should reach out to Dennis and
Yeah.
say, that would be the first step, is to say, let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
He may not have no idea that you've been
Exactly.
floating, you know what I mean? So, okay. Start there.
Yeah.
Move forward on that one. Any more discussion?
And there was-
Steve, what are all 7 boats running on the Day Sailor dock? Cause I haven't seen Lazy Jack out for a while, or I saw him early,
He's running, Gus is running, as you know, it's been the worst season on the record for them. But yeah, they're all running.
The Heritage too, and
The Heritage, remember, is getting totally rebuilt, so the select board let him lease another boat called Inherit the Wind, which is almost exact replica of that Heritage.
oh, okay.
And he's trying to do his best to take people out, but yeah, he went out
Okay,
there.
And I haven't seen Periwinkle. I mean, I've not been down as much.
Hey, Rickles is crushing it.
Yeah,
As far as the best, he's doing the best out of it. The 2 power boats are doing very well.
yeah, Lively, I've seen Lively Lady
I
Pat.
think in the fog, people are like, I can see, I can brave that for an hour.
Yeah, they,
So
well,
your
yeah,
hour trips are seem to be lucrative.
oh, good.
Just as we wrap up, the last item, I just wanted to keep people in the loop, upcoming meeting and topics. The select board did meet, 2 weeks ago, something like that, and approved the transfer of the Lazy Jack, license. But in that discussion, they realized, or noted that there's a lot of ambiguity and vagueness and basically lack of information in the ordinance about the day sailor and windjammer licenses, and all of what's wrapped up in that, berths, fee schedule, everything. It kind of, I mean, it's been handled for a bajillion years, sort of, so it hasn't been a problem, but it's not written down.
I told you a million times, maybe to accept it, but still.
So, we will have, an agenda item in the August meeting. They specifically want us to talk about, formalizing, the transfer a license from one vessel to another. Because we just dealt with that, but it was.
It was more a practice.
From one
than-
vessel to
it was-
another
it was-
or on?
Well,
One owner to another.
Okay.
Yeah,
So but that's a
transfer,
good
transfer of the
question.
license, but you're right, the license says the vessel, so.
Not the owner.
There also is a discussion about the overnight berths where these boats tie up. That also is not, written down anywhere that I can find particularly well. There's been a lot of practice over the years, so they would like us to look at how that is done. They like us to look at the fee schedule for how the day sailors, pay for their berths, their overnight berths.
All can of worms, just to get out, all can of worms.
Yeah. all-
You're gonna get into
You're
it.
welcome.
You're gonna get into it.
It'll be a sort of a big discussion. And then lastly, they would like us to look at the transparency and the way the process works in terms of renewals. If someone wants to bring a new boat to Camden, how do they do it? If these vessels are operating, how are they renewed? What's the process? What's the, how does someone new come in?
And that's the issue, yeah, the issue is what is it that the town, what is this permit? We've never even looked at it, what it actually is. Bruce, you've got a permit to have your boat at Camden. Does that mean that Sophie can't come in somewhere and say, well, I want my boat now in here, because she's had it for a long time? Well, you know, I think we can't give it to you.
I think she'd be a newcomer.
Yes, you said you come. So we've got, that's gonna be a big
For
one.
a few years now.
Aaron is one who opened up the can of worms. The two boats that have always, the two day sailors that wanna not bring their boats way over to the moorings, when the Merry Day is out and the Lose Our Friends is out, when they're out plying the trade doing a 5-day trip, their berths are open. Can I give you $900 for the season? And then when they're not there, I can put my boat there? Okay. So they've had that forever, just like the Merry Day has had that slot forever. If another boat comes in like the Tabor and says, well, Merry Day's been there, but I don't want it. Okay, well, maybe you guys have an arm wrestle to see who gets it? Cause how are you gonna, cause now that, cause these other two boats have had this, it's the same kind of vague process,
So that'll be a whole nother discussion,
Yeah.
but.
So it's a little bit of looking at what the practices have been, looking at codifying some of the practices and looking at changing some of the practices to make those processes more transparent, because it's a little bit of an inbred family right now.
Yeah.
So we need to be a bit more open and transparent. So
Well,
nice piece of work.
but as we have mentioned,
Junior banjos out.
you need to predict, you can't make it open season every year and expect people to invest in boats.
Correct.
Right.
So that would be, that's, no,
Because that's what they've been doing.
but that will be part of the discussion, is the renewal process, what's the options, what's the everything, so let's save that for
Well,
next time.
well, part of that, I mean, that's why we came up with a 3-year
Lease, right.
agreements. All right, that's one reason, but then the other thing is.
Let's hold it, Mark, let's hold it for
Yeah,
now. We'll go down.
We'll
the-
be-
Oh, and then we can leave with the clock.
There was a question at the beginning of the meeting as to, I mean, this is kind of nitpicky, I think, but how many parking spaces were omitted because of the
Touch tank?
touch tank and the picnic
Aquarium.
tables?
But people love that too. I'll tell you.
But so people were concerned as to the amount of parking spaces that
How many,
were
yeah, so how many?
gone.
Wait,
4, I think?
well, so we have 3, 4, 5.
3, 4,
You can go down and look at it. You want to have lunch?
You sure?
Send me a
On one of the
picture.
picnic tables?
Can you take a picture and send it to me?
Yeah.
Actually, I can come down with Cassie.
You gotta check out my new front porch, I mean.
I saw that.
Next meeting, August, Margie, was August 8th, is that what you're?
Yeah, we in Guadalupe.
Oh,
I guess we're sounding.
well, there goes lunch with you.
It's not a pleasure trip. We're getting it out.
Everybody else okay for August 8th?
I may be out, but
Dubious, but
I might be out for.
Let's
3
tentatively, let's set it for August 8th, but we'll have a lively discussion between now and then.
Is that Tuesday?
Is it Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month? And if that one doesn't work, maybe push it back a week to the 15th, but let's do August 8th for now.
Okay.
So we.
But the-
Thank you, everybody.
Be excited.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
You've got more.
On the water, they set the map yesterday, so. I'm
Nice.
that we will sell.
And what's-
Our meeting's in, everybody.
Go ahead.
Really?
But that,
I said, did you observe a lot of closure and?
it's,
Rock
this
solid?
different